In this first phase of getting educated, I will talk about why you even need a real estate broker. Studies have shown that approximately 90% of all people who try to sell their home on their own eventually list with a real estate company. The reasons for this are many, but one of the biggest mistakes for sale by owners tend to make is to overprice their home. If you think you are going to get a better deal working with for sale by owners, the odds are stacked against you. You are also potentially missing out on opportunities a good buyer broker can expose you to, who could also represent you in the purchase of a for sale by owner home, should that actually come into play. Real estate brokers have access to a lot more data than the typical non-broker has, and for the most part do a much better job with pricing their listings. This does not mean that there aren't overpriced homes listed with real estate companies. There are. However, for the most part, pricing is much more realistic. Working with a good real estate broker will also help you immensely in not paying too much for the home you ultimately decide to buy. The vast majority of properties on the market are listed through the Northwest Multiple Listing Service. As you can see on this page, there are many reasons why you will find it advantageous to work with a good real estate broker who is a member of the Northwest Multiple Listing Service. How and what a broker gets paid is something that is rarely talked about, but is a curiosity among consumers. I think it's important for you to know, as it will most likely clarify a number of things for you. When a home is listed for sale, in almost 100% of the cases, the listing company places it in the Northwest Multiple Listing Service. Every member then has access to every home listed by every company in the NWMLS. The listing company, as a condition of membership, agrees to share the brokerage fee the seller has agreed to pay with any other NWMLS company member who brings the buyer. Therefore, the buyer, unless they have agreed to pay their broker a fee, which is highly unusual, does not pay a brokerage fee. Your broker gets paid through the fee the seller has already agreed to pay. It is a common myth that real estate brokers make a lot of money. While a few do quite well, these are usually seasoned brokers who have worked many years building up a loyal clientele who refer clients to them and come back as repeat customers. They have earned their way to the top through stellar service to their customers and have worked very hard to get to the level they are at. For the vast majority of brokers, their earnings border on the poverty level. Commissions are typically split 50-50 between the listing company and the selling company. They are then split again with the broker that actually worked with the client and their company. Both the company and the broker also have business expenses, which can be quite substantial. Then there are business taxes on top of income taxes. In many cases, there are franchise fees to pay and referral fees to pay to companies or individuals who referred the client to them. When all is said and done, the real estate company and the representing broker take home a very small percentage. While every company, broker, and transaction circumstance is different, the chart to the right is an approximation of a typical transaction brokerage fee breakdown, not considering franchise or referral fees. In the state of Washington, the levels of accountability and skill have been raised. As such, real estate agents are now known as brokers. However, the terms agent and agency will also be used, as they refer to a broker's business relationship and fiduciary duty, or lack of, with their client. A seller's agent and a buyer's agent are by far the most common forms of agency. However, it is important for you to know that on occasion you may not have what you thought you had. It's always best to clarify this with whomever you are working with, although they should have clarified this themselves before starting to work with you by providing you a copy of the law of agency and explaining their agency role with you. A seller's agent represents the seller and owes fiduciary duties to the seller, not the buyer. Therefore, it is not in the best interest of a buyer to contact the seller's broker on any home they are interested in, as the seller's broker has a fiduciary duty to disclose to the seller anything the buyer says which could be of benefit to the seller. A disclosed dual agent represents both the seller and the buyer, and has disclosed this to all parties. However, if you think about it, it's really impossible to provide confidentiality and full disclosure to two clients on different sides of the fence at the same time. A non-agent, otherwise known as a transaction broker or transaction facilitator, Technically does not represent either buyer or the seller, but is still required to treat all parties fairly and honestly. However, they would not necessarily owe confidentiality nor full disclosure to either party. A buyer's agent represents the buyer and owes fiduciary duties to the buyer, not the seller. This, of course, is the best form of agency for buyers to enter into, and there is typically no cost to the buyer for this representation. A designated agent allows a brokerage to offer an alternative to dual agency when both the buyer and seller are represented by the same in-house broker and both have agency agreements. The designated broker assigns one broker to be the agent of the seller and another broker to represent the buyer. They both retain agency status with the required fiduciary obligations. A subagent works for the seller as a subagent of the listing broker and owes fiduciary duties to the seller, not the buyer. This is not a very common form of agency, and you will rarely come across it. As stated on the previous page, a real estate broker has a duty to provide you with a copy of the Law of Real Estate Agency. I have provided you a copy on this and the following 6 pages. The Law of Real Estate Agency is subject to changes and updates. What you are viewing is not necessarily the latest revision. Your agent is required to provide you with the latest version. There is a common misconception by some potential home buyers that if one broker is good to work with, working with several would be even better. Quite the opposite. The good brokers out there won't work with you if they know you are working with multiple brokers. Their time is too valuable, and they're worth being loyal to. Brokers don't get paid if you buy a home through someone else. All their time, energy, and costs of doing business will have been lost. Some hungry brokers may deal with these situations, but I've found that they put out less than full effort when working with clients who take this approach. When you find someone you want to work with, stay with them and be loyal. They will put out 100% effort for you and will have your best interests at heart. The best way to ensure loyalty on both sides and to solidify the fiduciary relationship with you is to sign a buyer agency agreement. This makes it very clear who the broker represents and spells out their duties to you. You may notice there is a compensation paragraph. This provides for the opportunity for you to pay the broker a fee for their services, which typically would be compensated back to you through concessions in your favor through the purchase agreement. However, unless you prefer to do it this way, as you learned on page 10, in virtually every case, your broker will get paid through a sharing of the fee the seller has agreed to pay the company who has the home listed. There are many forms of lenders out there, and these 2 pages will help clarify the differences. In terms of which type buyers tend to use the most, mortgage bankers and brokers are the most common, followed by banks, savings and loans, and credit unions. There is one important point I'd like to make, no matter what type of lender you choose. We in the real estate business are not typically fond of internet lenders. The experience and end result that we've seen buyers have with internet lenders is not always good. The cost of money fluctuates just like the stock market, and you need someone who is on top of things, who you can speak directly with, and is easily available to you for advice. When it gets close to closing, it is also important to have someone local whom you can consult with and who will keep you informed as to just what's going on with your loan. Not that internet lenders won't try to claim that they can do just as good of a job. The reality is, however, that there is just no substitute for a good, knowledgeable local lender who you can actually sit down with and have a conversation. When it comes down to borrowing the kind of money it takes to purchase a home, it typically doesn't pay to take chances with the unknown. There are lots of different loan types out there. Choosing a knowledgeable mortgage broker who has access to dozens of loan products is essential in matching you to the best loan to meet your particular circumstances. Pause the video here if you'd like to read more about the various ways to finance a home.